Whether you had a poster paper assignment or not, we would still be looking at displays, flatboard displays, and all of the writing that we're going to be doing at them or on them. These two signs, so they're posted out in the forest, are pretty good examples. They're attractive, the writing is limited, very readable, and colorful, and of interesting objects that people are likely to walk over and see if they want to read the sign. So you have an interesting limitation that you're going to be working on standard paper sizes, and that means we're going to have fonts generally around 11 or 12. So some of the directions, some of the instructions that we're going to be looking at here are for posters that hang on walls. So be sure to discriminate among the ones that fit for this assignment. So we're going to be looking at captions or labels or that part that is written on your papers. And we're going to kind of come at it backwards for this assignment that we're doing because we've been gathering information first, where if you were interpreting a location, you would already have the location first, and then you'd be writing captions about it. So either direction, make sure you do answer this. What question will the visitor most likely have about this object or picture illustration in relation to the theme or the big idea? And again, we've got this backward. You're going to have some ideas that you're writing down first, and then you're going to be seeking out just the perfect either photograph or illustration. I wouldn't use clip art, but other stuff. And we'll talk about copyright and using copyrights in just a minute. The best way to label is start with the specifics, exactly what it is that you're seeing in that picture. Or in your case, each time you're coming to a new page, try to start specific and then generalize beyond that. So if you were starting with this picture, what you see in the foreground are mule's ear, which is a sunflower in the daisy family. And you might start talking about why we have so many now, and it might be attributed to grazing and overgrazing, and that maybe the animals don't like to eat these, so they're what survive. And then you go to grazing in other places and across the West and maybe into other areas around the world. But start specific with what is right there, what is immediate, and then move into bigger ideas. Narrative should be conversational. Lists of facts are not interpretation, those are lists. Remember, interpretation goes beyond the information and into the meanings to humans, that we go from the specific, the tangible, and reach toward the intangible and the universal. And remember Tilden and provoke. So we do present challenges. We do present different points of view. We do try to change attitudes. So you'll almost always have a caption title and maybe even a subtitle or two down in your text. But in addition to those, you do want to entice the reader by highlighting the words that you think will catch somebody's eye and make them want to see it, like reward reading the whole text. So yeah, entice the reader, highlight larger text, something that's going to catch the eye with the most important words, the most enticing words, so that they will continue reading. National Geographic is pretty amazing at this. I hope you can get a hold of a National Geographic. I usually pass around a half a dozen or so around the classroom and just let students open it up to any page with the picture. And sometimes the entire text for that page and the next page is a caption for that photograph. Sometimes it's shorter and only 2 sentences long, but generally their writing is a match to their photographs. So both are pretty amazing. And by far, a majority of the time, they start with the specific. They tell you exactly what's going on in that picture that's of interest, and then they generalize it to more of that culture and perhaps to other cultures as well. So anytime you get a chance to pick up a National Geographic, look at the fantastic captions that they write. So how many words do you need? How many are too many? This will depend quite a bit on your target audience. Little kids, the entire caption might end up being under 10 words. But if you're writing for real readers, for adults, teenagers, we've got a little more space to work with. So thematic title or heading, we need to catch their attention and tell them what we're talking about in 1 to 7 words. There may be group titles or subheadings that introduce a text, and the title itself would be 1 to 7 words, but the introductory text is going to be somewhere in the 20 to 150 words. 30 being optimal, especially for a sign, something that someone's carrying in their hands. You can go a little bit higher. You don't want to hit 150 words very often. Any other captions or paragraphs, same kind of idea, that we're working in the 20 to 150 words, unless you've got young kids, and 10 words is often just enough. So yeah, we got a few more words here than you would normally expect from what I just said. But we got several things going on. First of all, this is in Canada, so the right side is in French and the left side is in English. It's also a regulatory sign as much as it is interpretive. This is a big sign too. You can't tell that it's 4 feet high and 6 feet wide. So it's not quite as hard to read, other than it's aging. You'll notice over there, we're going to look on the left-hand side that there are subtitles throughout. And the two most important ones are first at the top left, and they are in all caps, and they are in red. And then your paragraph underneath is in the 20 to 30 word range, so they're doing pretty well there. Then they go to black, still capitalized subtitles. And then when you look closer, closer here so you can read it, now we're also being able to look at the pictures. The pictures here aren't meant to be beautiful, they're meant to be explanatory. And then if we get right down to the picture level, we have a little more attractive design here. Still half in English, half in French, with explanation. A poster that's placed all around in the Redwood State and National Park. Starting there with a caption, it's 3 words. And then we have an introductory paragraph that's under 20. Then we have subtitles and very brief explanations under each one of those. Again, it's more regulatory than interpretive, but they are using good labeling with it. A very simple, relatively low budget sign that looks like it's been around for decades. There's your title, enough to catch your eye, an unusual way to grow. Then it goes into a story. So it might worry you a little bit that there you are, you're seeing the 6th, 7th word there are in Latin. But they get through that pretty quickly, and then there's a story that's being told and an illustration to give you an idea. And hopefully this is standing right next to one of these nurse logs or some of those trees that appear to be standing up on their roots. Design guidelines, you're going to really need to spend some time in SamHam. Can't quite read that last number, but you can tell about where it is. So yeah, write down these page numbers. It'll save you some hunting. 244 to 255 and 311 to 249 would be my guess on that page. So each one of your pages should look like an attractive poster, especially think back to that first slide on this presentation out in the forest with the tree and the moose. Borders around almost every picture, they tend to fade off into nothing, so almost always a picture will have a border around it. Backgrounds can be critical. Sometimes they're distracting. I deliberately went maybe over the top on this one, but it might catch your eye from a distance. Text. So we're going to be working in pretty standard text. We're not doing posters that would stand on a wall. So we still need to be thinking about readability. Text size and text type should match with what you're trying to do. This is a slightly cartoony writing, which is pretty informal. So depending on, that may not be appropriate all the time. Also, I put it over the top of a map to let you know you need to be sure if you do put text over an object that it's still readable. Some of these are more for posters on the wall that you do need to think about someone not as tall, someone in a wheelchair, that are going to have to stand a little bit farther away. There's more information in lowercase letters, so don't go all caps. It always looks like you're screaming. But it's a lot easier to read if it's just the normal combination of caps and lowercase letters. Spacing between the letters, for the most part, your computer is going to do that for you. But occasionally you can get some value out of how you space your words across a page. Recommendation of 50 characters or fewer per line. And we already talked about type, style, or personality. And for the most part, words are to be read. They're not meant to be the decorative part. Designing your page, balance is something that we think about, both symmetrical and asymmetrical. So this is very asymmetrical, where there's just a stripe of image at the top. Balance includes whether something is high, whether it's low. What do you think? This picture or the one before it, do you like its placement with all of the black together, or do you kind of like or dislike that heavy black over the heads of those people? There's a thing called the rule of thirds. It's helpful to get you started. You violate it pretty quickly. The idea is that you divide your image into 4 columns, and then not 4, 3 columns. So there'd be 2 equally spaced lines toward the center, and also in rows across. So you have 3 boxes going across, 3 boxes going down, 3 boxes down the center. And then the intersection of those lines can be a more interesting place. So rather than placing everything dead center, you want to move it off by a third in up, down, across, left or right. And you can see in this picture, I thoroughly enjoyed violating that third by pushing them way up into the corner, the people. All right, leaving design to mostly Sam Ham. Go to that book, take a look there. We're going to now move into what materials can you use in this class, which means we've got to be talking about copyrights, and the Supreme Court just made a ruling on copyrights that I don't understand yet. All right, but in general, if it's created, it's copyright protected. I know the internet world, we violate this like we never used to. It's copyrighted while you're still working on it. People can't come and steal your ideas, nor can people take your work and just modify it a little bit. So we lost the words. Someone in the academic world borrowing somebody else's work and not attributing it to them, we call it plagiarism. In the courts, taking somebody else's work and using it, it's called theft, and there are penalties. Taking a look at what educational uses are allowed, including this class, but it needs to be clear that the education isn't for the public, it's for the specific use in that environment. So only among each other in the classroom can we use these exceptions to the copyright laws, which is why the library is very careful about what they will copy and loan out. Okay, so for educational purposes only, I could copy a chapter of a book and cite it and then pass it out to you. So one chapter of a book, one article out of a periodical issue, and a limited number of photographs can be copied from a book or a magazine for educational purposes. And the poster that or the pages that you're creating will fit into this category. But outside education, if you're working for the state park, the national park, you do need to do it right. And I'm just going to go quickly here. This is not the final word at all. So if you do want to use something that is copyrighted, you do need to write to them. I would go online, get examples of copyright permissions, and you need to get a hold of that person, that magazine, and decide whether they're willing to work with you or not. With digital cameras, I know an awful lot of interpreters are taking their own pictures more and more. And copyrights usually aren't universal. They're actually done as leases. So you seldom buy an actual photograph. You lease a photograph instead, the use of the photograph for a certain period of time for a certain number of copies. Again, this is not the ultimate class on copyright. But yeah, if you're doing something and somebody wants to use it, yeah, just write out a contract. Again, get online, get a decent one, and you limit the use. So I have leased a few photographs for certain issues of a magazine, a periodical, a Forest Service brochure, and what I allow, I don't give them the photograph. They don't own it. They instead have a lease for at least one run of that brochure. There is this thing called the public domain, and it's getting grayer and grayer on the internet. Certainly, most government documents are in the public domain because they figured tax dollars were spent for it, which come from the public. So all USGS maps, you'll see so many online mapping companies that just use the USGS maps as their base. They don't need to pay anything for it. Some photographs that are made for brochures. I know Ansel Adam ran into some problems here because he was hired by the Park Service to take a lot of his pictures, and that was considered putting them in the public domain. He was already paid by his salary, so it gets a little complicated. A majority of library-sourced photographs usually have stamped on the back, released from copyright, if that's the case. Just because you don't see or haven't written the Circle C or the TM on it doesn't mean it isn't copyrighted. That's not required by law. It's just a really good idea. Putting your name and the date on the image or the writing, also not required, but certainly a good idea. Once you're away from education, you will need these things called model releases if you become a professional photographer, illustrator. These are permissions to use a person's image, and you try to get those in advance, and they also tend to be for limited time periods, very specific uses, and any description of compensation. You'll notice that on our U-Explore classes that part of signing up for the class, somewhere in there is going to be a photo release form. And we at the university in the U-Explore do allow students to decline that release of the photographs. So when do we require model releases of people? So if there are 5 or more people in a public place doing things that aren't embarrassing, and there's no emphasis on a single individual, that really is a group in a public place, we consider that public domain, and those people chose to be out there in the public. Children are a different issue. Boy, if you're using very many children, if you use children, anyone under 16 in a commercial way for advertising, you'd better get parental permission written down on file. It's not quite as difficult. It's not quite as required, not as touchy, that's the word I want, with adults over 16. So have fun, go out there, start collecting your pictures that are based on what you're writing, the information that you've gained, all of the principles of Tilden that you want to put together, of provoking, putting together whole themes, targeting a specific audience, making your way out to universals. And now, because it's not just a talk, you'll be collecting more images than you would have otherwise. The sooner you get at it, the more enjoyable it is. Putting together a good product is going to be something you can be very proud of. And once again, thanks for listening.